So we're here to see this talk has multiple titles. What's happening in my App Insights, some of it's Application Insights, has multiple names, but basics is we're going to talk about Application Insights, aka Application Azure Monitor, for the next 50 or so minutes. My name is Joe Guadagno. I'm a director in technology at Rocket Mortgage, nation's largest mortgage refinancer and originator. We're looking for a mortgage or for a potential new job, reach out to me. You can reach out to me on a couple of different ways. I already talked about that. You can reach out to me at J Guadagno on Twitter, Joseph Guadagno Net on Facebook, Joseph Guadagno on LinkedIn, or my site at jjg.me/about_JJG. You also see my slides on here, as well as other presentations that I have done in the past. So enough about me. We're here to talk agenda. So we're going to talk about Azure Monitor. Then we're going to go into what is Application Insights, and then how you can get started with it, and then enhancing our metrics. Now, a lot of this is going to be not necessarily interactive with you, but we're going to go back and forth between the Azure portal and some slides. We'll start off with a couple of slides just to give a high-level overview of what it is. Then we'll spend most of the time in either code or the Azure portal. So before we talk about that, we have to before we talk about Application Insights, we're going to talk about Azure Monitor. Azure Monitor is a service of the Azure suite of things to help you monitor your applications. And I know they say you shouldn't use the word in the definition, but in this particular case, it's pretty clear. You're watching your services, whether those are databases or APIs or message queues, etc. So what you can see here on the left are kind of the things you can monitor. So your applications, operating system, Azure resources, your subscription, your different tenants, as well as custom sources. So what these do is feed into Azure Monitor, and there's two different data stores for them. For the most part, you don't have to care about where the data store is. I think it's important to understand just so you have a breadth of what happens. So metrics get sourced off or stored off in one repository or database as outlined on this diagram, and then logs get stored off at another. These two data sources, which are listed in gray, reach out
Joseph,
to.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Are you sharing your screen?
Yes. Can you not see Azure Monitor?
All I see is black. Ron, can you see anything?
No, same thing. I just see a black screen.
Oh, let me try again. I'll stop. I talked through all that. This is what I was talking about. So on the left-hand side, you got the application, you have operating system, Azure resources, etc. Once all the data is stored off, you can then use Application Insights to really look into your application, and that's looking into containers, VMs, your application all over. You can visualize that through dashboards, which we're going to look a lot at, views or BI or workbooks. We're not going to look into BI or workbooks right now. You can also do some analytics around Metrics Explorer and analytics. We're going to look at the Metric Explorer a little bit, as well as some log analytics. And then we're going to see how you can generate alerts. We're not going to cover order scale or the integration. It's just too much to cover with that. So Azure Monitor has built-in monitoring for containers. So if you're using the Azure container repository, you can get automatic monitoring right there. It tells you the uptime of your services, downtime, allows you to scale up, scale down, all that stuff kind of built in to the platform. And you can also do it for resource groups. Here is a typical look at the Contoso resource group, which is not necessarily the one that I'll be sharing with you, but a sample of one. Here it says that the resource group has 288 active alerts. There's one VM issue. So you can get a holistic view of everything within your resource group or containers or VMs. It really just depends on how you set it up. Here's an example of what it looks like for VMs. You can see there's one in critical state. There's one that has a warning. There are 3 unknown errors. So you can kind of get a quick snapshot of the overall health of your application, and then you can drill into your app itself. So these are kind of like 4 screenshots all together, and we'll take a look at these in more depth. But on the left-hand side, or right here, you'll see that there's failed request, server response time, server request, availability, and here it's saying we're 31% available. Here we're handling about 3,500 requests per minute, and then here we have, in this time span, 430 errors and so on. This is a really cool feature. This is called the application map, which we'll show in a little bit. Here is our main app, which is listed as Fabricant Prod. Here you see that Fabricant Prod talks to 5 different things, which is why this looks like a star. Here there's an Azure Cube in the Fabricant account that it talks to, with an average response time of 18.4 milliseconds and a little bit over 8,500 calls. Here's a blob storage account that has a 243 millisecond response time, but you notice it's red because there's some errors and so on and so forth. And then here's some usage across the board. But again, we'll drill into that in a little bit. So how does Application Insights work? Basically, you have a web app, client app, web service, background services, as shown on this diagram, and hopefully you can still see the diagram. We have these things here that all report into a purple box. Now, in the previous slide, I said the gray box. It's kind of what they call the ingester. So this is collecting lots of different metrics, things like page hits, browser type, time spent on site, any exceptions, custom messages, etc. That's all aggregated here in this purple box. You then have these green boxes that allow you to do something with that data. You can generate alerts, you can run Power BI reports, you can interact with it in Visual Studio, which we'll do a little bit. There's a REST API in case you want to have your own custom things. And then there's, for a fee, continuous export, which allows you to take that metric data or logging and send it off to something. So what does Application Insights monitor? It monitors your request rates, response times, application failures. It also monitors the rates of your dependencies, the response times, failures, so how often you're calling something, what its response times are, what its failures are, any exceptions in the application, and this is really unhandled exceptions, but you can do both unhandled and handled, and this does it both on the server side and the client side if you're using an ASP.NET app or a Angular app or something like that. There's no limitation to where or what you can monitor. For ASP.NET application, it will show you your page view counts as well as load performance on your machines if you're using your own separate machine. If you're hosted in Azure, it'll give you a rough idea of the load you're putting on the server, unless you're in a VM. Then you get true stats with it. It can monitor AJAX calls that you make from your app. It can monitor user session counts, tell you how many users are actively on your site, how many sessions they currently have open. There are performance counters around it. Host diagnostics, which will tell you CPU usage, disk space usage, memory allocation, I/O, all those basic things. Anything you would see in perfmon, you kind of can see with the Application Insights. And then within your apps, you can diagnose trace logs or as I'll show you later on in some of the demos, you can see any of your application logs, anything that you implement with iLogger or some of your favorite logging frameworks like Log4Net or nlog or Serial can actually output their logs to Application Insights. As an added bonus, you can log your own custom events and metrics, which we're going to see towards the end of the demos. So what languages does it support? It supports .NET, .NET Core, and technically .NET Framework, but I got tired of typing .NET so many times. Supports JavaScript and Node.js. There are Node.js packages as well as a JavaScript specific SDK. It supports Java. It supports mobile development. There's iOS SDKs as well as Android SDKs, and it also supports different plugins. And these plugins could be many different things. Like we'll see, we're going to implement some logging plugins that help us log data even easier. So how do you integrate with it? I'm glad you asked. There are two different plugins that you can get for WordPress to start. If you go to any of the links on here, we're all going to start with jjg.me/AI_. So there is an Application Insights plugin that if you're using a WordPress site, all you give it is your Application Insights key, which I'll show you later on how to get that, and it will automatically do all the wiring. It hasn't been upgraded in like 3 or 4 years. That's because the initial loading JavaScript hasn't really been upgraded. But if you're like me, when I had a WordPress site, you probably used the header and footer plugin, which allows you to customize the JavaScript or the header and footer of your site. This is another way to do it. If you're in the Node world, you can do npm install applications insights. The -- save is optional for you. And then the 2 lines of JavaScript code here, constant app insights require app insights, and then you call setup with the instrumentation key. Again, I'll show you what the instrumentation key looks like in a second. If you're doing JavaScript, this is the basic code that you can use to get it. A bunch of it is all optimized code, and when you actually copy it from the Azure portal or the Microsoft Docs site, it's actually 1 line. The only thing you're really looking for is the blurred out line, which is instrumentation key. You're going to replace that string with whatever your instrumentation key is. So let's look at that. We're going to take a break from the slides and move on to some code. So bear with me for a second while I move stuff over to the other screen because I wasn't anticipating having to use the other screen. So hopefully you should see the Azure portal right now. There's 2 different ways to get to it. You can type in Application Insights up top. You can do the create resource. There's lots of different ways. Since I have it as one of my most recent used, I'm just going to click on it here. This takes me to a list of all the insights. Let me zoom in a little bit just in case it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to click create, and then as in typical fashion, I'm going to get some sort of wizard to go forward with this. I'm going to choose my subscription type. So let's choose the sponsored one. And I am going to actually no, it's in the other one. I'm try to keep them all together to reduce costs. Pick the resource group. In my case, it's in the resource group called presentations. I'm going to give it a name, and the name itself doesn't really matter as much, but I am going to call it Intro to jQuery Mobile, which is not a relevant site anymore, so I keep like constantly changing it and stuff just for these demos. Then you have the option of classic or work-based browser. For most part, you will always want to choose workspace-based. Some of the older apps all were in the what they call classic, as we'll see in a little bit with some of my older ones that haven't been updated. The workspace is essentially a logging server that you save all your data to. I don't have a workspace for this one. Actually, for this one, I'm just going to create classic. And it's going to give me a warning that it's deprecated, which is fine because I'm just going to delete this resource when we're done. Next step is click review and create. And then depending on how well I talked about Azure today is how quick this resource is going to be available. Usually the App Insights resources come up pretty quick. Usually, like I said before I even talk about it's done. Once I have it, it's good to go. We'll see a whole bunch of stuff on the side. Activity log, access control, tags, and diagnose are all standard Azure properties. We're going to go into the application map and all these in a second. So if I want to add this to my JavaScript application, all I'm going to have to do is go here, click on the getting started, which takes me to a link that no longer exists. But essentially, I am going to need this instrumentation key, which is hidden only because I have a plugin that hides it for when I do streaming and stuff, so people don't steal like database connection codes. And then I'm going to come across to my Azure, my other application, which is this one here, and I'll zoom in a couple of times. Oops, ooh, I zoomed in too much. Sorry about that. So here I already downloaded the JavaScript. If you go to that getting started now, it'll pull up a doc that gives you this JavaScript. Essentially, I have it saved off, so I don't have to keep doing it. And then I'm going to paste the code here, 814A blah, blah, blah. Now, it's okay for you to check this in the source code if you want. It's not as secret because it's actually in plain text in JavaScript. The worst thing that could happen with someone getting is they can send you bogus data and ruin your metrics. But for the most part, there's really no way of hiding that. So for me, I'm going to just save it and I'll commit that particular change, which is adding App Insights. And if you ever viewed my change history for this particular app, the last 30 changes have been the same message of adding App Insights to it. Once I do this, I have an Azure task or a GitHub action in the back that's going to publish it. If we wanted, we can go to the site and view the metrics. While we're talking about metrics, let's take a look at some of the metrics. Because there's no one on this site now, I can refresh this. I'm not going to see anything. So let's go to another site. We're going to go to my personal blog, which is hosted in Azure, or actually not Azure. It's hosted in GitHub Actions. And we'll see I'm not going to have anything in the failed request, or shouldn't have anything in failed request. Server response time, server requests are going to be blank because the server itself is not hosted in Azure, but I can go through and view live metrics on it, and this message goes away in a couple of seconds once it loads the SDK. Let's go to one that's a little bit more active. Apparently I needed to hit refresh on all these. I totally forgot to. So this is another site I run, jgg.net broadcasting. Now here we'll see more responsive stuff. So here we'll see the average server response time is under 400 milliseconds, except for one blip at 12:30 today. It took 3 seconds. I scroll down here, you'll see I'm averaging 3 requests every minute or so. And that's because there are 3 Azure functions running on here. Overall availability, there's no outages, so I'm not showing any availability. But let's start looking at some of these other metrics. So the first thing I'm going to click on is application map. This takes a second or so to do, but eventually it comes up with a map of the application. So we have the root of the app, which is jjg.net. These are the Azure functions that are running. Here, there's a call that's being made to josephguadagno.net via HTTP. I can click on the view details and see more about that connection. Here you see the fewest call, the slowest call. This is the only call that's made to feed.xml was 41 milliseconds. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. And then you'll see there's calls made to Azure tables. What's my time frame? In the last hour. I'm going to actually change this to last 4 hours so we get some more stats to it. You see I also make a call to youtube.google APIs, and I can click on that to see the average response time, 94 milliseconds. I can click on any of the links. Here I'm making calls to Azure tables. I made a call to the get tables, which was 34 milliseconds. Call to configuration was 8.5 for a get and 8.2. So I can really drill into my app, and the more dependencies you have, the bigger this is. And I can see I'm running 4 instances, meaning 4 servers in this group executing on this. So it's kind of neat, the data you can see out of it. And one more, we'll go through event meetups and view the application map to this one. Oh, it doesn't have it. There should be an application map for it, but for whatever reason, it's not enabled. So to talk about the other tabs, smart detection. As you see right now, they're kind of migrating this because it's going towards the alerting right now. So we'll cover that in a minute. Live metrics, I can see in real time what's happening. There's a slight delay in it for the initial because they don't want just people clicking on it. I can see in real time the number of requests coming in. I'm doing tracing in the application, so you can see here I got an error response. I'm making a call to HTTP, and this is just showing a sample. It's not showing everything that's coming through. But you'll notice these here, there's a blue line starting to come through, red line. So far, there's no failures. If we're on this graph for somewhere in 2 minutes, you should see a blip and everything because this has a function that happens every 2 minutes. But here I'm using about 140 meg of memory, virtually no CPU. Real time, you see I got 2 servers running in the instance, so you can see a lot about the app. There's transaction searches, which allows you to be able to look into your apps. I'm going to just see all the data in the last 24 hours. And you can see I made in the last 24 hours, there are 179,000 results, and these are a combination of trace logs or custom metrics that I did. Here in this list, we have availability messages. There's none, which means my app has been available the whole time. There's been a little bit over 2,000 requests being made, no exceptions, no page views. This is a pageless app. There's no UI to it. There's been 168,000 trace messages, which is a mental note for me. I have to turn off tracing in the app. There's been 2 custom events that happen, and we'll speak to custom events in a minute, and over 8,000 calls to dependencies. Then I can go and look through here and see there's been a bunch of traces. There's already a 409. I got a couple of put requests, a couple of get requests. So if I want to drill down on any of them, I'm going to drill down for the custom events for a second. So let's uncheck all these, choose custom events. You'll see I have 2 custom events, one at 2 o'clock and one at 9 o'clock. And these are in Pacific time, because that's what I have this app set for. If we look at the custom events, there's a random tweet send custom event. So I created a custom event to track when I send tweets. The purpose of this app is to kind of go through and tweet about any blog posts I write or any new videos I post, and then randomly takes a blog post twice a day at 2 a.m. and 9 a.m. and post about it. So let's go and take a look at that one. So this is the end-to-end transaction. There were 15 events that happened in order to post this. So if I look here, I get the, let's go all the way up to the beginning. There was a function called publish random post, which there are some details around here that talk about it. Then there was the executing. I executed it calling a particular method. This is a log message. Here I'm making an HTTP call out to a site, and then I am putting a message in a queue called Twitter tweets to send, which is done. And then we generated the random tweet sent custom message, because now I put the tweet in the queue and I'm ready to go. If I look here, I see a bunch of custom properties, and we'll walk through what this looks like in a second. Here we have in the category of function.publishers random post. That's the name of my Azure function. I create a custom property called title. In this particular case, that's the title of the blog post, protecting a ASP.NET Core Web API with identity, and this is the content of the tweet. So I was able to go back and watch end to end what happened with this particular application. So how do we go about doing that? Let's take a look at another sample application. So here I am looking at the atypical Contoso application from the Microsoft samples site. And this is a ASP.NET application using MVC, and it has a basic view. Let's just kind of quickly run through that and take a quick look at what that application looks like. And turning my head, see if there are any questions in the chat. Nothing in the chat right now, which is also code for I need to drink water or tea because I'm getting parched. And let's see if the window opened up. It might have appeared in a different window, so bear with me for a second. Yeah, there it goes. It does that all the time when I do this presentation. It's harder when it's on one screen because normally I appear on another screen. Oops, it loaded and I clicked enter. So this is a simple site. I'm going to skip the about page because that generates an error on purpose. If I go to students, it's going to show a list of students. If I go to courses, it shows a list of courses, instructors, and departments. Behind the scenes, this is using a SQL Server database and entity framework. So while that app is up, let's go take a look at the code. There's nothing special in the code for it. It's your atypical MVC app. There's create, delete, details pages. So how do we add telemetry to that? To this one, I already added it, but the easy way to do it is to right click and choose add and do Applications Insights Telemetry. It's going to come up with these two options that gives you, and your installation may vary. I'm running Visual Studio 2022 preview right now. The UI looks slightly different with 2019 and 2017, but overall it's just you right click, choose add dependencies, and then you got a choice of Azure Application Insights or the SDK. In most cases, you want to go and choose this one. If you want it hosted in Azure, you choose local if you only want to track it here and not have the Azure Application Insights instance running. I'm going to choose the publication. It's going to want to know where I want to put this. And then it's going to ask for, once I chose the subscription, it's going to ask for the resource. I don't have one for Contoso University yet, so let me create it. By default, it takes a project name. It's going to create a resource with that. It's going to ask me what resource group I want it under. So I should have a Contoso one. Oh, it's under presentations. And then you typically want to put this in the location of where all your resources are. So this is going to be published to US West, or actually it should be West, not West 2, only because you save some money on changes. Unfortunately, there isn't a logging instance for that, so I have to create a new one. Once I do that, the resource is going to be created. After the resource is created, Visual Studio is going to add in the configuration to the app, which adds an application insights.config to the app, and also will generate an app settings.json setting for it. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to get the next slide ready. For those of you that are watching, go to this site, please. Come on. Go to this site and click around on this site and see what happens. That's basically the version of the site that we just looked at in prod or in Azure. Well, that's happening. This is published. And click next. It says, hey, do you want to update it? I'm going to click finish. Then it added everything to it. Now Application Insights is in there. So as you're going to the site, which I'm going to do right now. So if I go to Intro to App Insights, Azure websites.net. I never get the name of that right. Let me just do that. That's why I put a short link to it. jjg.me/AI-Contoso. I have to spell AI right. And I have to obviously spell my URL right. Typing is really hard. You think I do it for a living. Oh, it can't be read. It can't be read. And that is because I did not publish it yet. So let me go and publish it. I forgot, as part of the process, I delete it so that we can republish it with the new key on it. While that's happening, let's take a look at how you can implement logging to it. Oh, what did my build failed? Oh. Oh, I might have deleted the resource. Hold on a second. Let me go check my sites. There's Contoso University Resource Group. Oh, I might have actually deleted it. Ooh, I accidentally deleted it. Bear with me for a second. Let's recreate it. Actually, it doesn't really matter because we can show, I've already showed you the extension. So let's show you the actual code that did it. So if we go to, in this particular example, and this example is available on my GitHub. If you go to Joe Guadagno on GitHub, you can see the intro to App Insights. We go to the controllers, and then I think it's in the home controller we put it. Here's the code. So there's actually a link on the website that says push button. So what we're doing here is we're getting an instance of the telemetry client. This was automatically added by Visual Studio. Once we added it, we add, using dependency injection, a reference to the telemetry client. We pass in that telemetry client. From there, we can then do a couple of different things. So here I am saying I want to track an event called button push, and then we're going to return back the instance. So basically I can see how many times someone clicked button push. If you rewind back to the previous metrics, I was showing you the tweet sent event. This is essentially the same thing. We did telemetry client track event pushed, and then passed in some data to it. We can also do logging around it. So here you see we got a logger.log warning, which says someone is clicking about. So how do we get that onto the site itself? Well, there's a couple of different ways to do it. The first thing is we add a reference, a NuGet reference to the Application Insights appenders. So let's go take a look at NuGet for a second. We'll see that there are a bunch of properties or a bunch of packages. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to search for Microsoft.Application Insights. I'm in the update, sorry, not browse. So once you do that, you're going to see a bunch of different collectors or appenders. The collectors are essentially things that get the data. So this one is going to look at all your dependencies. So this is what grabs in those HTTP calls, database connectivity, etc. And then it's going to publish it to something. We have the web, ASP.NET Core. These are ways to interact with it. So everything related to ASP.Core, number of hosts, requests, response times, that's all coming from here. We then have some extensions. So here you see we have a logging extension, and this allows you to, if you're using the Microsoft Logging iLogger, there's an App Insights plugin for it, which allows you to take anything that's in that iLogger, so our last example, and send it out. There's also a couple other ones. If you're using Log4Net, there is a Log4Net appender. By default or by convention, all the Microsoft provided appenders all have Microsoft.Applications Insight, the product, and then appender. So you see this one is actually brought to you by the Serial Log team. So they have it as, because they call it a sync, they have an Application Insights sync. Microsoft put together an nlog target for you, and there's a couple others in there, but if you search for Application Insights, there's a bunch. I'm going to share with you some of the more common ones. Once you add that into it, in my case, we're using nlog, we are going to add an Application Insights target. So if you're familiar with nlog, everything has a target that it's writing to. Here we're saying we're giving it the name of Applications Insights target, we have to insert our Application Insights key here. So the key I got from generating it, I would paste that here. And then any additional stuff I want to track. So here I want to make sure we track the thread ID, which is used within the ASP.NET Core app, so I can correlate everything together. And then you apply rules to it. Here it says that anything trace level or higher, I want you to write to the AI targets. That means I'm pretty much writing everything there. Keep in mind, the more you write, the more potential you have for cost to your application, because you get a bunch free for the first 7 days or a 7-day rolling average. After that, there's a fee to it. And if you go over the cap of, I think it's 10 gig or gig a day, it will start throttling you, and or you will get charged for it. So let's go back to the slides for a second. So here are some of the other logging packages that you can do. I mentioned the iLogger, the nlog, and log4net. If you want additional diagnostics, there's trace listener, source listener, ETW collector, and event source listener. These if you want to track things on your server. For custom events, you have these 4 custom events that, or sorry, these 8 custom events. There's track page view. For the most part, you don't need to use the page view. This is mostly for single page applications like Angular apps, React Native apps, where you control how pages are navigated. So it allows you to track individual views. Track event is something more specific to you. Like in the example I said, it was tweet sent event, or the custom event of button pushed. Track metrics is another one that's generally used when you're looking for performance-based things. So you add a message to the queue, you might want to track how long the queue is, or maybe you're tracking a metric for how long it takes a user to click a button once the page is described. You can track those individual ones. You can use track exception to log extra diagnostics for a given exception. So this is where, if you notice on the push event I did before, I added the custom things like the title and the tweet text. If you use track exception, you can add additional properties like the user that was on it, anything around the actual exception to help you debug it. The track request and track dependency are only necessarily if you want to record something that App Insights doesn't do out of the box. So if you're using calls to like HTTP client or any ADO-based database call, you don't have to do those track dependencies. But if you're opening up like a TCP/IP socket to a server or reading from a file, you can then track your request that way. And track trace is used for any third-party calls you want to make. If there's something extra you want to think of that as a way to do even more custom logging to it. That being said, I think the next slide up is all resources to Application Insights to help you out moving forward. I list these as Application Insights. The name has changed a couple of times. You might see it as Azure Monitor or Azure Monitor's Application Insights, but for ease of use, I still call everything Application Insights. All these URLs should still be valid. One thing I did not mention, there are 2 extra services that you can use in the event you have an in-house application that's not hosted on Azure, like your own instance of IAS. You can install the App Insights status monitor, which allows you to catch the server specific stuff and send it off to App Insights. One of the questions I get on a regular basis is, can I store all the App Insights stuff on-prem? And the short answer is no. You can export what is in App Insights to an on-prem database or an on-prem service, but the collecting and all the other metrics right now is only available in Azure. That being said, I'll open it up to any questions that we may have, and I don't think there's anyone actually in the call right now to ask questions.
There were 3 of them during.
Okay.
All right.
I guess
Yeah. So thank you so much, Joseph.
you're quite welcome. Have an awesome day.
Actually, I do have one question, just
Sure.
real quick, because I attended an App Insight session this morning, and it was focused on the application side, monitoring application. From your presentation, it sounds like you can monitor both application and infrastructure.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep. If we go to the first set of slides, is probably because when we didn't have the issue or when we weren't showing the slides, but yes, you can monitor containers, you can monitor resource groups, you can monitor VMs. Basically, anything that runs, especially within Azure, they're automatically tracked, but you could monitor queues, you can check for performance of just about anything with it. And
those graphs that you showed, that just comes pretty much
comes
pretty
standard out of the box.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is very interesting, especially the real-time stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool, especially if you're doing like a larger product, like we do Super Bowl launches and we're watching real time. You can see how many people are on the site, servers. There's alerts that you can set up to automatically scale, or if you're getting 5 exceptions in a minute, that's abnormal. It'll send you an alert saying, hey, something's up. There's a lot you can do with it.
Yeah, I guess the biggest benefit would be watching the metrics to be proactive rather than reactive. It's like you want to see how your whole ecosystem is, I guess, faring against a heavy load like that, and be able to react to it.
The site I was showing before, the jjg.me, for that particular site, I was running into an issue. Like, it went 2 days without anything. I'm like, what happened? Apparently I pushed something and forgot to create a resource, but it was generating errors like crazy, but the errors were going nowhere. But I was able to see what the error was. I was missing a table because I forgot to publish a table. I then created an alert, say, hey, if you get more than 3 exceptions in 5 minutes, send me an email now. So now I'll get emails when that happens.
So now you get a ton of emails now.
Well, now I don't, because I fixed the problem, but yes.
Well, that's
but you can do emails, or you can do pings too if you have the Azure, what's it called? The Azure app for your phone. You can get desktop notifications to it there.
And do you hook it up to some ticket tracking system? Okay.
Yep. It supports GitHub, Jira, Trello, Azure DevOps, aka TFS. It supports all the major ones. It can generate tickets for you automatically. When you're in App Insights portal and you see an exception, you can there's a button there to say create issue for, and it'll automatically, if you have it tied to an issue tracking system, create the issue for you right there with all the diagnostics attached to it.
Oh, wow. That is awesome. Right at your fingertips.
Literally.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for the presentation. If I don't see you, I guess the thing this is the last session. You have a good weekend.
You too, sir.
See ya.
Bye-bye.